All right, welcome everyone. And thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedules today and joining us for today's webinar. So quick intro, I'm Charles Jamerlan, and I'm the product lead of Connect, which is the flagship participant recruitment platform that we here at CloudResearch has created and developed. And today we're going to talk about our latest and greatest feature, Connect Waves, which really makes the process of creating and setting up longitudinal studies very simple and seamless. So today, I'm also co-presenting with Kimberly Bigi from the Stanford University's Behavioral Lab. Kimmy and her team there have been Connect users from, right at the start when we first launched years ago, and they've been running longitudinal studies ever since. And they were also one of the first beta users of Waves. And she's here to talk about how Waves has worked for her work there at the lab and share some success stories and ultimately show how it's given value and proved to be, somewhat successful in the work that they're doing. So we're looking forward to hearing from her. Okay, so I know many here are very familiar with longitudinal studies, but just in case, what are longitudinal studies? So longitudinal studies are projects that collect data from the same individuals repeatedly over a period of time, right? So it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months. And actually, Connect is really the best platform to run these kinds of studies because we have the high quality participants, highly engaged individuals, that we've onboarded on Connect. So they're the kind of people you want to be able to touch and reach out to at these intervals, right? And although, the researchers, you folks can run longitudinal studies on Connect and get all the data you do need, there were a few key problems still, mainly around the user experience. So number one, it's a bit of a repetitive setup, right? So users had to create waves one by one as individual projects, right? So you can imagine how that's very repetitive, which really means it was a very cumbersome and repetitive and relatively manual process. So, you had to create a wave, you had to edit it, you had to schedule it, then you had to monitor the data coming through, and then, repeat, rinse and repeat, right? Now for 2 to 3 wave studies, right, not a big deal, right? But 10, 20, I don't know, 100 wave studies, yeah. So like the level of pain has now exponentially risen. So that's really, one of the bigger problems, and therefore it was really an inefficient use of your time, because each wave was ultimately a Connect project. Your dashboard would be somewhat cluttered, and maybe you had some non-longitudinal studies mixed in with some longitudinal studies, so it's a little bit disorganized. And so the time that you're spending finding, organizing, detailing all these various projects could have been really used to focus on the study itself, on the design and insights of that study. So, since we already had the right participants on the platform, we already solved that problem. All we really have to do is find the best user experience, right, to solve these other problems. So Connect Waves to the rescue, okay? And what we've built is really a streamlined and organized way to build your longitudinal studies and, daily diary studies in a matter of minutes, right, not hours. And so with the feedback that we received over the course of time from, beta users like Kimmy's team and other potential users, and also from within our own internal testing with our own internal research staff, we've built Connect Waves, a feature where you get one set of screen, simple and ready to go, automated participant tracking, really around the notion of eligibility from wave to wave. And you'll see that as I jump into the demo shortly. Attrition estimation. We provide some suggested estimates on how many participants you need to start out with in order to hit your targets, right? That's always kind of been a question on what value you need to start out your longitudinal projects with. And while we've also created this really simple way of doing this, we also have maintained customizability. Still give you that flexibility to tweak each individual wave to your liking based on your project setup. And lastly, like centralized wave management, which I think is one of the biggest benefits of using Connect Waves, right? So I talked about how your dashboard could be cluttered. So Waves eliminates all of that. It puts everything in a very simplified, organized way so you can view and manage your project yet without the clutter. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump right into a demo. Okay, so what we see here is the Connect dashboard. So I'm going to be going to this demo with the, I guess, the understanding that most folks here are familiar with Connect. So we're going to not focus so much on the overall usage of Connect, but just specifically on Waves. But if you do want to learn more about Connect, we have plenty of material out there, our knowledge base. We have a few YouTube videos as well talking about it. But here is our Connect dashboard, right? And let's go ahead and create a Waves project. So let's hit create project, and you would simply choose the Waves project type. Go ahead and hit next. Okay, so let's plug in some basic information. Now, these are global Waves settings. These are the various pieces of information that will be applied to each and every individual wave that gets created in your entire series. Let's give it a name, weekly Waves project, and let's just fill in the required fields for our demo. But there's other fields here that you should fill in as you're doing your setup. Things like the description of the task, instructions to display to the participants, targeting a specific device, requirements, that sort of thing. Moving on to project link, here's where we would plug in the URL to your survey. Let's say it's on Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey or whatever platform you're using, you would plug that in here. So let's put in an example URL. All right, and again, this is going to be applied as a default to each and every individual wave in your series. Okay, now in the cost section, we're going to tell Connect how many participants that we actually want to end up with, right? So let's say we wanted 50 participants to go through the entire journey of the series from wave 1 to wave X, whatever that may be. 50. Oops. 50. 50. I think my keyboard just done. Okay, 50. Okay. How many minutes do you estimate that will take? Okay, and then let's pay, let's see, 35 cents. Okay. Okay. All right, now here we'll plug in how many waves our project is going to contain. So let's say for this example, we want 5 waves, right? And then we have preset intervals here, right? We have daily, weekly, monthly, or custom for you to easily select, right? And if you choose custom, you would have to set the date and time of your waves later on in the setup. But for instance, you choose monthly, right? And things fall on a weekend and you only want business days, you can check that off. So if it falls on a Saturday, it'll go ahead and schedule it for the following Monday of that week, right? If you also choose daily, we also ask you how many waves you would launch per day. Let's say you have multiple waves that launch within a span of 1 day. So put 3 here, and then you can set the individual times of which your waves would launch on those days. Okay, before our example, let's just go ahead and choose weekly. All right, next we'll choose when our first wave will launch, right? So let's go ahead and choose tomorrow, and we'll just choose what time of day when our waves are going to launch, right? And it's going to be the same time, excuse me, for every day of each of the waves launch for any subsequent waves, right? But you can again modify that later on and configure that to your liking. Here we're going to set how long each wave will be open for the participants to take. So let's plug in 3. We want to open for 3 days. Now, if you notice on the right-hand side, we've got the pricing calculator show up with an estimated total costs, but we'll focus on that a little bit later. Let's just keep going through the setup. Next up here is the eligibility criteria. So by default, what we have said is that anybody who is eligible for wave X would have to have completed the previous wave. So if you're for wave 10, anyone who's completed for wave 9 would be eligible for wave 10, and so on and so forth, going back to wave 1. But you could also adjust this globally to put a percentage of waves completed, right? So let's say you put 50% here, and so for wave 10, anybody who's completed 5 of the 9 prior waves would be eligible for wave 10. So that's all flexible depending on how you set up your individual wave structure. I always recommend too, for maximum feasibility or maximum eligibility, you put something like 1% here, which basically says anybody who's taken any wave will be eligible for any subsequent wave. Okay, but for example, let's just choose our default. Okay, so now we've plugged in all those variables, those parameters. You see that we've created all the individual waves, right? So we have our first wave here. Then we have our 4 future waves, 1, 2, 3, and 4, for a total of 5 waves, right? And with all the right parameters we set, duration for 3 days, cost, and time, so on and so forth. So our attrition calculator estimates how many participants you need to start out with based on those parameters that you've inputted. So here we're estimating that you need 202 participants to end up with 50, right? And this calculation is based on data that we've collected, over the course of time here. But all the stuff can be overridden. It just gives you an idea of what would make sense. So let's go ahead and do that, right? So, also want to note that you could increase this. It's just a suggestion. If you wanted to say 300, for instance, you said you wanted more participants, the calculation will update accordingly. But you see, we end up, with 102 at the end, right? Because all the calculations remain the same. And inversely, let's say you put in 100, something less than what we suggested, you're going to end up with less than your target, right? So, for example, let's put 202. Okay, so let's go to configure. So here you can configure every single wave, and wave 1 will just be a little bit different. So we'll start out with that. But you notice that all the global settings have been imported into each wave as default values, but you can override them, right, to your liking. So we can say, wave initial, just give it a different name. You can change other parameters as well. You could even change the URL. Let's say you were using different surveys for different waves. You can plug that in here. Let's say you wanted to pay something differently for each wave. You can plug that here as well. You can't change the number of participants for any wave for wave 1 because that's set on the global setting. As you saw earlier, we were modifying it. Completion-wise, so at the end of the survey, right, your survey, you typically add a redirect URL or a completion code that gets the participants back into Connect. So there's a default one created, which you can apply to the entire series of your projects. But let's say you want to have a different one for each wave. You can go ahead and click Custom Completion Settings, and we'll generate a new redirect URL for you to use for that specific wave. So if you're organizing things in a different way, on the survey side, and just want to have different URLs to manage all that, you can certainly do that as well. Eligibility, we can't modify eligibility settings for the first wave because for obvious reasons. And then time frame can also be set here as well. Okay, let's hit save. Okay, great. Now for future waves, we can configure that and there's a little bit different tweaks that you can do on subsequent waves. So under the cost, you can override the attrition estimation. So I think we estimate 135 or something for this second wave. But let's say we wanted to put 200 just because we feel like we wanted more individuals to come through. When you do that, you notice that all the other settings have been removed, right? Because you're overriding the estimation. So you're going to have to manually set all that again. But you can always, put that back to user estimation calculations. At the moment, it's a little bit of a process, but you would just simply go back into cost, leave this blank. All right, hit save. Okay, and then we have to modify this. Let's say to 205. Okay, so all the calculations do come back. Okay, let's see what else here. Okay, so eligibility. So what I want to show with eligibility now, anything after wave 1, you could configure the eligibility settings. You can now change up how people move from one wave to the next. A better example would be to show you, I guess, the last wave. Okay. So by default, as I had mentioned earlier, it's anyone who's completed the previous wave would be eligible for the current or active wave. But you could also set it for the number of waves previously completed. So for wave 5, for instance, let's say you only wanted, 2 of the 5 waves completed, you can put 2 here, right? So it could be a combination of waves 1 and 2, waves 1 and 3, 2 and 3, so on and so forth. Or alternatively, you could choose which specific waves you want to have completed to be eligible for wave 5. So let's say I just wanted participants who completed waves 1 and 3. I can choose that, hit save. Okay, so you notice, so all those settings have been applied. You can see that's been reflected here on the dashboard. Okay, so that's, an example of how you can really configure all the individual waves. Although the setup is pretty simplified, you can still kind of tweak it to your liking and get it to how you want it to act and build. All right, and then the rest of the settings here are something that's familiar to Connect users, basically like participant targeting. Here's where you would choose demographic targeting if you wanted to target a specific demographic, like race, age, gender, that sort of thing. Here's where you would do it. You could also choose which location you wanted to. We have a few countries outside the US that we have participants in, as well as the platform targeting. You would be able to choose to exclude, let's say, other projects or include certain participants. This is where you would do it, and they would be all applied on the global level, on the global setting. That would be applied to all the waves in your series. Now, let me direct your attention over here to the right-hand side, the pricing calculator. So, after all the parameters are set and met, right, you have all the pricing here. We'll give you the estimated total cost, how that's going to cost you. And you would see all the various waves in this dropdown, and you can see how much each wave will cost you. And you can further expand it to see how the costs add up, if there's any fees that are applicable to you, as well as how much you're paying the participants. Okay, so when you're all happy with this, you can hit save. Okay, we have this option if you want to do a gender balance or census match. If you have only a general population, a demographic, but we can leave it as is for now. Okay, I think that didn't save. Let's just try this again. Okay, let me quickly just put this back in. Weekly waves. Okay, HTTPS, example.com. All right, let's just get this to save. 50 participants. 0.35. Okay, say 5 and weekly. Okay, and let's choose tomorrow and 3 days. Okay, great. Let's just hit save changes. Okay, and leave us this. Let's see. Okay, great. So now we've added that project on our dashboard, as you can see here. And as I mentioned earlier, at the webinar, that prior you would have all 5 ways. You have to create all 5 ways, and they would be cluttering your dashboard now. But now we have this one card that encompasses all the waves into the one series, right? And you could click on the scheduled icon here to see all the waves that are yet to be launched, and then make up your series. And you could click on the gear icon to edit it as you like, as long as it hasn't been launched yet, it hasn't been completed. Okay, and you launching the series as simple as click on this menu icon, hit launch series, and you can launch a series as we'll do here without any funds, right? I see I have no funds in my wallet, but prior to your project, your first wave launching, you need to ensure you have enough funds in your wallet to be able to launch that, right? So let me just hit confirm. So you see how it just turned red, right? Because it's telling me I don't have enough funds. It's going to launch tomorrow. I need another $24.50 in order for that wave to successfully launch, right? So yeah, well, it's very dynamic. And then once the wave actually launches, you'll just see the active progress of that wave here on your dashboard. So again, very clean, very centralized. Here's an example of how it would look like once you've completed, some of the waves. The icons have changed to a completed tab. You click on that, and then you'll be able to see all the completed waves here as well, in a similar UI as the scheduled ones. So again, just very organized. And then lastly, once you've actually collected the data and the waves have launched, you're going to get the standard Connect managed view, where we have information and metrics on that particular wave, right? As well as the ability to go ahead and manage, bonus, approve, reject your submissions here. But the one change that you're going to get with Connect Waves is this section up here that tells you kind of high-level series information. The number of targets for your series, the number of waves completed, number of waves scheduled, and then you could just simply choose which wave you want to take a look at. And and which will basically show that, you click on that and it'll reload the screen and it'll give you information for that specific wave, right? So you can kind of go back and forth. So again, no need to having to search for on your dashboard for a particular project ID or a project name. Everything's been consolidated and put into one centralized place for you. Okay, so that concludes the demo. I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you again. Yeah, we have Kimberly Bigi from the Behavior Lab at the Stanford School of Business. And she is here to talk about how, the waves in action, right? A success story, how it's really, proved to be successful and valuable in the work that they're doing at the lab. So yeah, I guess without further ado, yeah, Kimmy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Charles. It is really great to be here and to help co-present this amazing tool. It has been really great for our team here at the lab. And as Charles mentioned, I'm a research coordinator at the Behavior Lab. And we essentially function as a resource for all of the faculty and PhD students at the GSB. So we interact with a lot of different researchers and run a variety of different research projects. So having a tool like this under our tool belt has been really helpful for our team. So I'm excited to share one example of a study that we ran a couple of weeks ago. So I'll be talking today about a 1-week daily diary study. Participants took 3 mini surveys a day, 1 morning survey, 1 day, and 1 evening survey. And this was across 5 working days. We also had an initial baseline survey to collect all of our initial participants who were going to be retained across the entire project. And in that initial baseline survey, we got 100 participants and we retained on average around 75% of their participation, which was awesome. So as you can see on this page, this is what kind of the initial setup looked like and kind of what we just saw in Charles's demo. Before, we would have had to do 16 different postings for this project, which can be really confusing and tiresome to go back into the dashboard and find specific postings that you're looking for. Making individual edits and modifications to each of those postings can not only be really repetitive and time-consuming, but also I think leaves a lot of opportunities for missed errors or mistakes that could influence your data quality. So having everything centralized in one location like this was so easy for our team. And here you can see what our study setup looked like. So we had the 3 mini surveys. I left the instructions essentially the same to be for all the mini surveys. And in the configurations later on, I would just essentially edit the time and pay estimates and some other small details like that. So a bit more about the study's context before I move into the rest of the setup. These were some of the things that we were interested in looking at and measuring within those mini surveys. So the researchers were really interested in looking at things like feeling monitored and judged at work, and also self-censorship and stress. And the reason why we needed this longitudinal 1-week study and why it was daily diaries was to see some of these day-to-day dynamics and also temporal ordering of some of these things that we were interested in looking at. So this is why Waves was really useful and easy for us to collect this data. And this was more of a preliminary project, and we're going to be running a 2-week-long version later on. So we're excited to use Waves for that as well. And now onto the actual study setup. So kind of what we just saw in this demo, but we had 16 waves set up for our project. There were daily waves with those mini surveys. So we had 3 launches per day. And then you can see the specific time estimates down there, as well as how long will each wave be open for participants to begin. This was really key for us because we had essentially launched on East Coast time to East Coast participants. And over here on the West Coast, well, it's really helpful to, of course, be able to schedule launch these postings. To be able to schedule pause data collection was also really helpful, especially for the morning survey, because that survey opened and closed essentially before I even started my workday and really before I even woke up. So being able to eliminate the need to manually go in and pause data collection on that end was really helpful. Default to 4 here was needed because 2 out of the 3 surveys a day were open for 4 hours, whereas the afternoon survey, which was at 12 p.m., was open for 3 hours. And so it's really easy to just go in and configure that one afternoon survey series. And then on the next page, we have the final configuration of what everything looked like. So obviously these are the first couple of waves, and then if we scrolled down, we could have seen the later 16. But as you can see, just having everything centralized in one location to see all of those tiny details, like the payments, the times, and being able to see that in one place in the entire timeline of your project to really double and even triple check that all of your details are correct, I think was so helpful, instead of like having to go in and out of every posting into your dashboard, get really confused about what posting you're looking at. Instead, you could follow along this timeline, and it was super easy. And so if I wanted to say I made a mistake and I wanted to go in to configure one of those waves, or say I was setting it up, I would go into editing the wave configuration, and it would essentially look like this. And as I mentioned before, we kept the mini survey descriptions essentially the same. So I left that there, the screenshot on the left side, and then all I did was essentially edit the time and pay estimates and some other tiny details. And then as we can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screenshot there, what Charles just talked about, which was the choosing specific waves to be completed. For our study, participants only needed to complete that initial baseline survey in order to complete any of the other waves. So if they wanted to complete wave 14 and nothing else, they could have technically done that. But I can really see that this functionality would be so important for people that have very specific prerequisites for, say, wave 5 is really important, that people complete wave 5 before completing wave 6. Instead of manually downloading participant IDs and having to sort through who's qualified, you can simply just press this button, which makes everything way more automated and easy. So once data collection actually starts, this is what our screen looked like. Essentially, once I launched the series, I did not have to do any sort of admin work afterwards. I simply would check in every now and then to see how the project was going, which everything was going very smoothly because the setup was so easy. And just having everything in one centralized location, being able to see this drop down if I wanted to check out wave 11 and see what the completion rate and bounce rate was for that, really easy to just go in and check instead of having to juggle through multiple postings and trying to find all these rates on my dashboard. It was all in one place, which was really nice that everything was all centralized. And so for some final key takeaways we had about this tool, first of all, the time savings and reduced administrative work were huge. As I mentioned previously, we would have had to do 16 different postings. And as Charles mentioned, there's even longer longitudinal studies where you could do 100 postings. And so instead of having that all cluttered on our dashboard and having to be confused going in and out and have that process be super repetitive, we just had it all in one single project. Making the workflow much easier to visualize. And like I just mentioned too, data collection was also all automated, so I had minimal ongoing management and just occasional check-ins to see how things were going. And this all kind of fosters into data quality and consistency. I think a lot of times if you're manually setting up a longitudinal project, and you're having to create all these duplicate postings and edit these things, there can be a lot of room for error in terms of missing some tiny details. And Waves kind of eliminates that and makes the data quality in that sense much stronger. It ensures that there's no missed launches. You're not missing specific timings of those launches. You're targeting the correct participants, like that custom allow list that they have. You're making sure that the right participants are taking the right surveys. So on that end, it's super great. And it's also just really, I think, reliable for the participant end and kind of establishes that trust between the researcher account and participants. If we say that there's going to be a survey open every Monday at this specific time, the survey is there, and I think that will help retention rates as well. And then finally, in terms of collaboration, the single shared project view really eliminates the need for everyone on your team to juggle multiple postings and drafts. And instead, there's one source of truth, which means way better communication, less emailing back and forth. Everyone can see live updates. the complete timeline, participant engagement, as well as participant flow and any drop-offs that may be occurring all in one place, all of which has been so incredibly helpful for our team. So we're so thankful that we've gotten to use this tool at the B Lab.
Great, thank you so much, Kimmy. Yeah, really appreciate that that success story that you just shared with us, and yeah, looking forward to getting more feedback from you and your team. So yeah, thank you again. So what's next on the horizon, right? So what's next for Connect Waves? So as you've heard from my demo and from Kimmy's success story, there's really been a lot of features that have proven valuable, and want to give more back. We want to add more value to Waves, right? We've had over 200 Connect Waves projects launched since we launched this feature. And so, yeah, we've gotten a ton of feedback. So see, here are some of the things that are coming down the pipeline. The ability to clone an entire series, right? So you could just kind of right-click a series, hit clone, and all the waves get poured over into a brand new setup. And all you would have to do is just modify, a couple things here and there. So that will save a lot more time. Enhanced participant bonusing. So in the future, you'll be able to specify a bonusing to bonus participants which waves they've completed. So for instance, I wanted to bonus the participant who's completed all waves, or 5 out of the 10 waves. That's going to be a lot easier to do at the end of the series. Localized time schedule launches, right? This has kind of been a much requested feature. So right now, let's say you're doing a national study and you wanted to launch across 4 different time zones, but at this, I guess maybe at the same time across 4 different time zones, but local to that time zone. Right now, you would have to create 4 different Waves projects, right? So in the future, you'll be able to just create one project and it will launch for the participants' consumption on their localized time zones. That's going to be, again, reducing the amount of clutter in the dashboard. Relative wave scheduling. So this is the feature or the ability to say, hey, I want wave 2 to launch, 2 days after wave 1 completes, or wave 5 launching 1 month after wave 4 completes. So that way you would only have to set a hard time and date for wave 1, and everything is just relative to that. So we also have the ability to do targeting on individual waves, right? So I think Kimmy just talked about having the include list, for the entire series, but currently you're not allowed to do that on an individual wave basis. So we're going to add that feature where you can further customize eligibility by including or excluding certain individuals on the wave level, which I think will be very, very helpful. And then lastly, just the ability to reopen completed waves. There have been some instances where, some researchers wanted to get some additional participants from a wave that's already been completed. So just being able to reopen it and getting more participants, with a click of a button. So as you see, we have a lot more planned that's coming down the pipeline. So yeah, looking forward to really, making Waves even better. Okay, so I'm going to now open up the floor for some Q&A for the next 10 minutes or so. You can certainly just unmute your mic. Unmute your mic. Are we, Teresa, do we have the mics enabled? I'm not sure if you do. Or if not, you could actually also just type your questions in the chat box. All right, so I have a question from Jessica. She says, what if survey questions differ by waves? Do you recommend setting up individual studies rather than using the Waves feature? So I think what you could do here, I guess you could do a couple different things, right? You can certainly create a different survey for each individual Waves and just change the URL for each one of those. You can do that, or if you have maybe more of an advanced Qualtrics programming or whatever it is you're using, you can kind of do some branching workflows within the Qualtrics server itself, and set up, I guess different links to that area in Qualtrics. But yeah, I think I would definitely recommend just probably setting up individual surveys and just linking them to individual waves. That's definitely one of the easier ways to do it. Also, number 2 here, regarding attrition estimation, is it possible that more than the estimated number of participants complete the study? I'm confused at the number of the participant number limit per se or limited estimation. Oh, okay. Yeah, so the estimated number that happens within every single wave is, we're calculating the attrition or the drop off between every wave. So we're cap, and we're essentially kind of putting a cap or a target for each individual wave, right? So I think an example that I gave, we started with 202, and the next one I think was 137. So for wave 2, it would be up to 137. Like we need to have 137 participants to get to, right? I think it was like maybe 85 on the following one, right? So they would be I guess the max per wave, the max cap per wave. Number 3, what will the data look like? Will data from all waves be merged in a single data file, or should I download the data for each wave? That's a good question. So currently, it's going to be you have to download it from each individual waves individually, right? But I think in the future we'll be able to have a download all button to put them all in one file. So that's actually a very good question, and I think very good feedback off the bat. And the last one from Jessica is it possible to set up an incremental payment, higher payment in later waves? So yes, currently you could change the cost value for each individual waves manually. You would just have to, manually set the cost, from 35 cents to 45 cents, so on and so forth. But perhaps, maybe in a future version of Waves, we can have an auto increment function where we could just, let's say, boost by 10% for every single wave in the future. So again, thank you for the questions and very good feedback that we could probably look into for additional features into Connect. Okay, so I have another question here from, I think it's Dosimu. Thank you so much. Okay, so the question is regarding studies that have different surveys on the same day, morning, afternoon, evening, for multiple days. Will the system make sure that participants do not take the evening survey in the morning? Would survey be only available at the time they should take it? Also, I'm not familiar with the system. Will participants need to download an app? Okay, so as far as making sure they take it within a certain time period, that's where you could set like how long you want your waves to be open. So if you set it for, let's say, 3 hours in the morning, after the 3-hour threshold has been hit, the project will automatically pause. The wave will pause for that one day, and participants will no longer be able to access that wave after that time, right? So you could definitely limit it with a specific time frame. And no, they will not have to download an app. It's completely web-based. So what happens is that once the participants who are on Connect are eligible for your study, they'll get a notification to let them know that there's a study available for them to take. They click on that, and it opens up a web browser. So it could be on their phone, it could be on their desktop, but yeah, it's no app necessary, and there are notifications that do go out. And I did fail to mention specifically for Waves, we do have also SMS notifications enabled. If the participant has that enabled on their end, then they'll also get a text notification in addition to an email notification. All right, thank you for your questions. Okay, and then we have one here from Matt. Okay, it's same for long term with many waves. If we want to do a 2-wave survey, following up with responses for wave 1 to see how their answers change after a couple of weeks, is this feature still worth it, or are we better off just creating 2 separate projects? So Matt, yeah, the answer is it's absolutely worth it, right? So kind of, on the back end, we're essentially just creating multiple projects, right? Like maybe how people have done in the past. And we just kind of put a layer on top of it to be able to manage that in a more centralized manner. So I would certainly still recommend to use Waves, right? I think we've had some people use it over the course of over a couple of weeks, I think even months. And actually, in fact, it's less more about Waves than it is more about Connect. The kind of participants that we do have on Connect are perfectly suited for longitudinal studies. They're highly engaged and high data quality. So they're the ones who would be more likely to follow up after a couple of weeks, after a couple of months, right, to come back and take that project, right? Because they get notifications, there's incentive, right, to kind of come back and they're familiar with the platform. So yeah, long story short, I would definitely recommend using Waves for any longitudinal study, just also for the sake of convenience. Okay, all right, thank you, Matt, for your question. Okay, we have another one from Desomu. What is the cost of using the platform for data collection? So outside of what you're paying the participants, it is, well, you would only pay a service fee of 25% for academics and nonprofits. If you're not a nonprofit or an academic, then the rate is 40%. So we're giving more value back to the academic community. But yeah, that's essentially just the cost of using it, the service fee. And if you are a new user for academics and nonprofits, the first 10 days are free, meaning you're only going to be paying what you're compensating to the participant, but the fee is zero. So it's really on us to give the platform a try. And yeah, and Waves comes out at no extra cost. We have a bunch of other features, and that's all part of the platform. All right, thank you for your question. Yes, some it's 25% of participant compensation. So if you're paying the participant $1, you're just paying us 25 cents. Okay, I have a question here from Walid. If the data collection is targeting a specific profession, registered nurses, how can you verify that they are really registered nurses? Yeah, this is a very good question that's come up from time to time, and we are working on some other features within Connect to help this, right? So, I guess one of the things that Connect really does shine in is really the data quality, right? So we have a very rigorous onboarding process where we have, our participants who sign up, they, go through a screener, some behavioral questions, they answer open-ended questions, of which we have a team on staff that just manually verifies the open-ended questions. And then we constantly monitor their usage on the platform, right, to ensure that they're really high quality. So with all that said, we're really kind of vetting and putting the confidence in the people coming on the platform that they are really who they say they are, right? So if you're really a registered nurse, and all the data quality checks are in place to support that, then they're more than likely really a registered nurse. But with that said, we are working on something. This may be later in the future, maybe sometime next year, somewhat of like a premium qualification where those individuals, a specific target, maybe let's say it's a doctor, right, or some kind of official, where they need to take that extra step to actually verify them, right? So let's say it was a doctor, maybe they have to go through a verification process where they have to provide their license or their their NPI number or whatever it is, and then we can lock them in and say they're actually a registered doctor, that sort of thing. So, but over the course of the last 2-3 years that we've had Connect, a lot of the data that has come back and the feedback that we've gotten from researchers, have supported the case that that data is very high quality. So, that's really less of a concern. But I think if you really, as far as your question is concerned, yes, at some point we will have some kind of verification process to really identify and really solidify some of these qualifications that we're targeting. Okay, no problem, Walid. Does anyone else have any other questions that they want to ask? So yeah, so all in all, like I said, Waves is available in all researcher accounts. There's a tutorial article that you can navigate to at some point to know more about Waves. Just use the bit.ly link, bit.ly/KBWaves. And as I mentioned, there's no fees in the first 10 days from the launch of your first study for academic and nonprofit researchers. And also, if you have any questions after the fact, you can always send a support ticket to us at Connect Support, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. But again, thank you all for your time today, for joining us in our webinar. Thank you again, Kimmy, for joining me today here and co-presenting and sharing, your success story with Waves. And we're really looking forward to building more on Connect and giving you all back more value and more time, right? So your time and your money goes a long way. And after a few days, we'll have this webinar posted on our YouTube channel, so you can always go back and review any content that perhaps you may have missed or want to pass it on to somebody else. So, all right, great. Well, thank you all again, and you have all a wonderful day and weekend.